and welcome to Witchy Woman Podcast. I am your host, DaNae Sweet, and this is episode 96. Today, we are going to talk about palmistry. It is a lost divination art that I do not see very many people practicing and really diving into that kind of divination. I met somebody on Instagram. His name is Kalem Turner, and he is from the UK, and he owns Fortune by Kalem, Tarot, and Palm Reading. I got to have the most educational interview with him this weekend. He told me all about where palmistry came from, the influences, the different flavors, and all of the little tidbits that I just thought somebody look at the palm of your hand, saw the lines, and it was like, that was the end of it. No, so much more, which I love convoluted things that are like just have layers upon layers of meaning. That makes my little Gemini mind so happy to have something that it can pick apart and treat it like a puzzle. So you bet I am going to learn more about this. If Kalem starts offering classes, I'm going to be taking them. In the meantime, he did recommend a couple books that I'm going to be reading, but I don't want to take too much time. I just want to get into the interview because I think you guys are going to freaking love this. I just think that there's going to be a large chunk of you going, I'm going to learn palmistry now after this interview. So without further ado, let's get on with the interview. Okay, that rhymed, and I did not mean to. It sounded cheesy, but I'm leaving it. There we go. Okay, cool. I'm so excited to do this. I know nothing about palm reading at all.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun to talk to you and have you kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got started and like a little bit of history. I know you were mentioning some history about it, which I know nothing about either. So can you introduce yourself to everybody and where you're at? 'Cause I think that's interesting too.
So my name is Kalem Turner. I'm in Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland. Today we are the new moon in Scorpio. And I've been doing palm reading for probably about 5 years. But I actually started in tarot reading, which I'm still pretty good with. But palmistry really became a passion of mine because, like you said, it is so unknown. Not a lot of people are familiar, and everyone seems to know someone who has tarot cards, but not doing palmistry. For me, I would say I kind of got into it because I wanted to up my game. I wanted to kind of go beyond tarot. And at the same time, I was studying astrology, and I noticed there was like a major connection between palmistry, what's going on in the hand, and someone's natal chart. When I say astrology, I don't really mean like your star sign horoscope. I kind of mean like, elements in the natal chart and aspects of that, the planets.
Okay.
I found it kind of endlessly fascinating, really. It is a little bit different, but it's unique to every person because everybody has different hands. There are kind of themes that run through it, but again, it's going to be unique to you in the same sense that your natal chart, your birth chart is unique to you.
Oh, cool. I never thought of I had no idea that astrology was connected to palmistry at all. Like, I thought it was just reading the lines and having like a map of what it is. I had no idea it could be connected.
Yeah. Well, I think if you see like a lot of palmistry signs, you'll see that there's a lot of like planetary symbols in the hand, and we call these mounts in palmistry, but they also usually include the zodiac signs and the fingers. And there are a lot of palm readers out there who would disagree with me. They would say that, the Jupiter in the hand is not the Jupiter in the sky. But I see it reflected in different ways. So sometimes it will be like the dominant element in a person's natal chart will be reflected in the hand shape because we can characterize the shape into 4 different elements. So like square with short fingers is kind of earth, that's practical. Water is kind of a long, elegant looking hand, but it kind of manifests in different ways. For example, my partner, he has his chart, his Mars sign is Aries, so it's exalted, it's in its ruling sign, so it's pretty prominent. And if you look at his hand, the upper Mars section is completely swollen, which is like the characteristic of it. So I really see parts reflected it. Not everybody is going to know that though, because not everybody knows their astrology beyond their star sign.
True. Yes.
So it's great when someone does know their chart. I've had people come to me and they've said, "Oh my God, you just read my natal chart in my hand."
Wow.
But that's not going to be the case for everyone. Like you said, sometimes it's just going to be more important to interpret the lines and kind of see them as life paths for the different areas of life. A huge part of palmistry is character analysis in the hand. So, seeing the headline as the mentality of a person, the heart line as their kind of emotional or romantic being. And it's kind of like making predictions based on that. You do see some things that are quite literal in the hand, but I think you're going to have to take a mixture of the structure or scientific part of hand reading and mix it with like a palmistic intuition to give a good reading.
I love that. I like when people use more than one thing, like more than one skill to use into divination, because I can read tarot. I think everybody reads it different. Especially I don't like the rules of tarot, so I tend to read more intuitively. Like if I see a color or something stands out with me on the card, that might be more important than the book meaning to me.
Right. Yeah.
But then there's others that like swear by the book, like this is what it means, and that's fine if they want to read that way. But I really prefer like bringing everything in and using your intuition. I think that's important.
Absolutely, they have to go hand in hand if we're, making a pun about it. But it kind of has to be a mix with palmistry, I would say. I mean, for me, I really thrive on structure. I love that this symbol means this, and it usually definitely means this. But there are parts of palmistry where you have to be flexible. The bigger lines I see as more literal, but there are smaller lines in the hand. So like when everyone comes for a palm reading, they want to know about relationships, and it's not always something that comes up in the hand. In modern palmistry, you'll find that marriage lines are not really respected anymore. But I think you just need to have that intuitive capacity to read them, because I've seen the hands of people who have had 2 really long relationship lines, and I've said, 2 marriages, and it's been right. I've also seen someone who had like 7 lines very close together, and I was like, I haven't seen this before. And she said, well, I'm polyamorous. That's probably why.
Oh, wow.
But then you'll find other people who have had a string of relationships, but only 1 line comes up, and it's because they're more contained in their affections, or it's more about like their needs or what they offer in a relationship, kind of how it's formed. So there's lots of different methods of interpretation. I mean, all across the world, there's many kinds of palmistry. It kind of originated in India, or so it's said to have originated there. Certainly the Indian Vedas are our oldest record of palmistry. It's about 4,000 years old, according to them. But also very, very old in China. So I guess it's more of like an Asian origin we would see. It was historically thought to have been brought to the West by the Romani travelers, or the Romani, the people kind of mislabeled as gypsies. They would have kind of brought it in medieval times. And then it kind of spread across Europe to, different kinds of people who might never have practiced it before. But today there's so many different kinds. I mean, you can get Indian palmistry, gypsy palmistry, Western hand reading, astrological palmistry, chirology, which is a kind of different modality. So there's many different ways. I would say that I've cherry-picked the best parts from each tradition, because any book that you find on palmistry is going to have accuracy, and it's going to have parts that aren't so accurate. I'm not a fan of Indian palmistry where it originated, but I do believe that it probably works well in India, because people are much more traditional in their senses there, and it's much more literal and traditional in the reading sense.
Right.
But I had to kind of cherry pick and figure out on my own what worked and what didn't. There's not a lot of palmistry going on where I am. I think I'm the only dude that really does professional palmistry in the country. I kind of recently gave myself the title of Scotland's #1 palm reader, but it wasn't a hard title to claim because there's only a few women who practice it, and they're not super prominent like here in the capital city or even online. So I'm kind of trying to save it from falling out of favor, just because I think people are going to think it's going to be wishy-washy. But palmistry is so much about yourself. It's really the lines in the hand, it's the shape of the hand, it's the fingernails, it's the rings, color, texture, temperature of the hands. Everything can tell you something about who a person is and what they're kind of suited to in life.
That's fascinating. I've never gotten a palm reading before. Nobody around here offers it. So that's part of it, but I never really thought about getting one. So
I'll give you one. You can send me some pictures later and I'll just kind of message you, a few things. But it is relatively scarce in this world. I mean, it is really seen as like a Roma or Gypsy practice or like an Indian thing. But there are like a good amount of people taking an interest in the West. And I think kind of in the 1800s, there was really a surge of palmistry. It became the kind of number one profession for fortune tellers.
Yes.
Just because tarot cards weren't so widely, they weren't as illustrated back then and they weren't as widely available. But everyone's got a pair of hands, and it kind of, it not only cropped up in like fun fairs and tea rooms, but there also became a really large academic study, the scientific hand reading tradition in the West, which really did a lot for it. I think it really evolutionized it, and brought it to what it is today. So, yeah.
I know that like in the US in like the 1800s, spiritualism became that whole movement really opened up the door. I mean, yes, there were some frauds, the mediums that would like pretend to like hit the, there was those, but it also opened up the door to research, like you said, research and actual diving into the different kinds of divination. And I do see, like when you read about that, you see the palm readers and the beautiful like pictures of the fairs when they, the posters from, they had the palm readers. But that's the only thing. I don't know anybody. I'm trying to think of anybody I know that would actually do that. Maybe I have an astrologer friend that I think she mentioned she was studying it, but I don't think she offers it like for anybody else yet.
But I think it was that kind of rise of spiritualism that really did a lot, because everything seemed to be, even in this country, just from hearing tales of like my auntie, she gave me an old deck of cards that belonged to her grandmother and said, she did palmistry at the dinner table and tea leaves and all that kind of stuff. I think it had such a resurgence back then, but in the modern age, it's almost fallen out of favor. And I call my business, my name's Kalem, but I call my business Fortune by Kalem because I'm trying to save it from becoming like a tacky or a disrespected. I think a lot of psychics or clairvoyants are actually fortune tellers, but they don't want to call themselves that. Simply because of the funfair connotation or the tacky connotations that it might have. Personally, I do see palm reading as fortune telling, divination, but it's also hugely like, I don't want to say psychological because I'm not a psychologist, but there are so many nerves in your hands connected to your brain. The lines in the hands form in the womb. The head line forms at the same time as your head. The heart line forms at the same time as the heart. And if fingerprints can really identify who a person is, and we've only really done that for like 100 or so years in the West. They've done it in China for like 1,000 years. If they identify you as a person, then why can't the rest of the hand illuminate other things about you? Even if it's just kind of personality diagnosis, you can make educated predictions on people. And then when you combine it with an intuitive capacity, then it really kind of works for readings.
I think that there are names, like labels that in the spiritual community that still carry some pretty decent like negative baggage, if you will. And I think fortune teller is one of them. Psychic. I hate calling myself a psychic because of the connotations that people have, like their first gut instinct when they hear that, especially if they're not in the spiritual community, they're like, oh God, you're fake. And I hate that feeling. So I have even a problem. I tend to use the word intuitive instead because I just don't want to deal with their crap.
And we do kind of get grouped in together by people who maybe aren't in the realms of spirituality, like kind of people who just go about their 9 to 5. They might think that a palm reader is the same thing as a psychic medium, is the same thing as a tarot reader, is the same thing as a clairvoyant or whatever, and they're all different modalities, really. But I think palmistry is probably the one that is shrouded in the most mysticism.
I think so.
And it's probably because it's the hardest to do. I mean, if you go and buy a tarot deck these days, you can look at the image, and just from the image, you can tell if it's good or bad and kind of get an idea. You don't have to really learn as much. But with palmistry, the lines in the hand, people aren't really going to have an idea unless you give them that basic structure. And it's pretty hard to find a structure that's super accurate in a lot of books. I think the leading book on the field by Goldberg is probably the best one. But I would say that that's pretty much the only one I would really recommend if you're looking for pure accuracy. The other things you have to kind of cherry pick from different traditions. And again, it works differently for different kinds of people, different kinds of readers and clients as well.
That is so cool. So how did you get into this? Is this something that you were doing for yourself, for your own spiritual practice? Or is this something that you're like decided, I really want to learn that because it's intriguing?
Yeah. So I'm 26 now, and I kind of took a real interest, I would say about 4 or 5 years ago. But when I take an interest, I take like a hard interest and I dive like hardcore. I've been reading tarot cards since I was a teenager, and I actually got my first reading when I was like 10 years old. So I'd always kind of been interested. But when I started to really commit, and I kept saying to myself, like, I can't work a normal job. It's not working out for me. I'm going to go to college and study counseling and holistic therapy and all this stuff and make a real study of tarot, but also astrology and palmistry. I was kind of inspired a little bit by my auntie, because although she didn't do it, she gave me this old deck of cards that were her grandmother's, and the kind of stories seemed so whimsical about it, and it kind of sounded really simplistic as well. When I started looking into it, I was like, okay, it kind of is simplistic, but if you want to give a real good detailed reading, you really need to study this like a science and then perfect it like an art form. So I just started eating up every bit of palmistry I could find. Like, I've probably read a couple hundred books on the subject, scoured the internet for videos, but really practice does make perfect with this. It's the same with any other kind of reading or any other kind of skill. The more hands you see, the more you will learn for yourself. And I would say that a huge part of me learning palm reading was learning astrology first. Pretty much the 7 classical planets, I guess they sometimes call it, the ones that we see being most relevant to individuals, because they do show up in the hand. Sometimes in terms of the element, but it's like too often I will see a Gemini person and they'll have a bent pinky finger, which is the Mercury, which rules Gemini. Or I'll see like an overpronounced Mount of Venus and the person happens to be Taurus or Libra or, what have you. It can show up in so many different ways. Learning astrology and the characteristics behind elements and planets really transferred over to palmistry in a great way. But the lines, I would say, are a little bit more literal. The planets are more about your character, your capacity, the energy of you as a person, whereas the lines describe more literal experience. Take, for example, like the Lifeline. I think a lot of people kind of get a little bit tense when I say, I'm going to look at your lifeline, that they're afraid I'm going to predict death, but it is a lifeline. It's about your life force energy, your lifestyle, your physical body and energy levels. Occasionally it can be about your lifeline, but usually it's not going to be.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because every time I see something on Facebook, they're like, look at your lifeline. I'm like, well, that's probably not good.
I would say stay away from those Facebook ads, because there's just so much misinformation in them. Some of them are great, but I see half of them being absolutely bogus. A big trending one is the Mystic Cross. And everyone says, oh, I've got a cross in the palm, I'm mystic. And the reality is it's found in one very specific place. Crosses are generally quite a negative sign in palmistry. They're not really something you want. People are kind of wanting to see them wherever they are,
Somebody, that reminds me, somebody on Instagram actually messaged me and they said, do you know about a line in the hand that says you're connected to a witch? And I'm like, no, I know nothing about palmistry. And they're like, well, I swear that I have this cross in my, or this junction in my hand lines that show me that I'm connected to a witch. I'm like, I have no idea. I know nothing about it. Maybe it has something to do with your ancestry. I said, but you're going to have to look that up.
I mean, it's not something I've really come across. I do get messaged some pretty crazy things,
right?
Mainly from India itself, because they vehemently believe in palmistry. And you can get like a palm reading on the street, maybe not now for COVID, but like before, you could get a palm reading on the street for I think like 5 rupees, which is like nothing compared to the prices we charge here. But I remember one day someone messaged me and they said, this imam, I think he was like a Sufi Muslim, he said that an imam told him from his hand that he had a special line in the hand to fight off the jinn.
Okay.
Which are a big thing in like Islamic folklore, I guess.
Yes.
And he asked me if I could confirm this, and I was like, this is not my realm. Like, I don't do Islamic palmistry.
Right.
But it's wild the kind of variety of things that people will claim to see in the hand.
Huh.
I like to think of myself as a very practical and pragmatic reader, and that I admit that most of what you see in the hand is your mental and physical capacities for life.
Okay.
And you kind of make predictions based on that, along with your intuition.
That is
But it's wild what kind of folklore people have about palmistry, and it's a big
right.
part that interests me.
That was the first. It's so funny how things work out, because that's the first palmistry question I've ever been asked, and I had no idea. And at the same time, we were talking, like it happened all at once, where that person asked me this question, and then we got into contact about talking and having this interview. So I was like, that's so serendipitous. I love when things like that happen. So how do you, because of COVID,
Yeah.
can you read? Like, can you do this by, because I know it's nice to have a shop and touch somebody's hand and have that physical contact. I know I like to have people in front of me when I do readings. It's really beautiful that way, but I do them online now, like this, like a video chat. How do you do it now?
So when I started out, it was definitely always in person, and I like to touch someone's hand and really kind of lean close and get like a good vibe of not just their hands but their energy. COVID, of course, changed all that. I had never ever wanted to do online readings because I was kind of in love with that idea of this is like an old-fashioned method and it's very personal.
Yes.
And I think adding like a computer into the equation just kind of takes away from the I don't want to say whimsical aspect, but maybe mystical aspect.
Yes.
But right at the start of COVID, I said, I'll challenge myself. Maybe I just need to look at this more as like a study thing. I do still offer readings online in person. Only for the last month or so, we had to take 6 or 7 months off. Nowadays, I don't touch people's hands. I just kind of wear personal protective equipment and just look from a distance kind of thing. But I do readings online as well, and I tend to just ask people for pictures of their hands from different angles. It's usually 8 pictures, so like 4 of each hand in different kind of angles. And as long as there's kind of good lighting and the camera is a fair quality, then it's pretty decent. Yeah. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me. I'm actually really glad I did it now because I kind of opened myself up to a different kind of clientele. Whereas before I would mainly be reading, British people or people who were kind of traveling through here during the festival time. But now I have a good client base in America as well, which is lovely and really kind of all over. So it's cool to see a great variant in hands.
That's pretty cool. Like I feel the same way. I'm extra, so I like I like the ambiance. I like the whole aesthetic of being able to be in the room and have that connection with them. And I like all of my candles lit, and I like that whole thing when I'm doing a reading for somebody. But now, because of COVID, that's not going to happen. I don't even know when that's gonna like lift or when we'll be able to do that again. But I kind of have the same, or had the same feeling about not being able to be in person. I do them on the phone, and I've always done them that way, if somebody can't come to me, but I prefer in person, just so in case they have a bad reaction. Have you ever had that? Like, I'm giving a reading to somebody and they ask questions and we get to asking, spirit about this, and it comes something sometimes will come to upset them or make them cry, especially when that's their beloved dead come through. And I like to be there to support them. So I hate not being able to support them through my computer screen if they're crying. So to me, that's the worst part. Do people have that kind of emotional reaction when you're doing a reading like that?
I think people used to have sometimes quite extreme emotional reactions when it's in person. Because, if you're holding someone's hand, and it's very easy to see something like trauma in someone's past in the hand, it shows up very quickly. And, to really validate a person that's right in front of you and to have a physical connection with them, that can be a lot. I think the human element is maybe removed when doing online readings. So it's maybe not as emotional. And I kind of type it up like a report usually. Sometimes I'll be talking to people on video like this, but I usually like to type up like a report when I'm just seeing pictures of it. And again, it's kind of like a natal chart in that sense. I do think that part of my character is that I can sell, like I'm a good salesman of palmistry in a sense, and that I'm not trying to sell negative experiences to someone, but I am trying to show them how that can be a lesson for them and how it can be better dealt with or avoided. It's kind of like to be forewarned is to be forearmed.
Yes.
And just because there is something negative in the hand, this is something people ask all the time. Do the lines change? Sometimes. Generally not a lot. Because they are formed in the womb, you kind of get like a basic structure. And by the time you're a young adult, it's kind of fully formed in the sense that it's not going to change massively. But say you got a lot of trauma on your headline, and then you go through years of therapy or shadow work or whatever it is, the island or the break or whatever can self-repair. So it's cool in that sense. The same with the lifeline. A lot of people will suffer from fatigue, tiredness, or illness, and they'll have a pretty weak lifeline. But then they take up a different kind of lifestyle, and their lifeline becomes deeper and stronger. Certainly the nails. I actually start reading hands by just looking at the nails, and they are growing all the time. So the condition of them is going to change massively throughout the lifetime. So what's found in the hand is not always fixed. I do believe that there are some things that we can't necessarily avoid, but you can kind of sway things in your life if you're more aware of them as they happen.
That is so cool. I love that. So I have another question. So I have had a tumor in one of my under a fingernail. Does that affect a reading? Like if you've had, I have a very slight scar and my fingernail is there's a permanent bump in it now because of the scar tissue, I guess, underneath. So does that change the way you would do a reading if somebody had like a tumor or a scar or something?
I think you kind of have to be a little intuitive with that aspect. And I don't know what it is today, but you're the second person that's talked to me about scars in the hand today. But people will often ask me, like, what does it mean if I've cut myself here, if I burn myself there, if I break this finger? Sometimes it just means you broke that finger, you know? But I think sometimes it can also kind of represent a subconscious aspect of yourself that's trying to scream out. So sometimes I would include it, sometimes not. Generally, the meat of what palmistry is how the hand is formed naturally, rather than attacked by outside interference, if you like. But I'm not totally against the idea of seeing an injury in the hand as an omen. I think a lot of modern palm readers are against the idea, but there's some people who love it as well, and I'm kind of in between. Again, I kind of just go with the flow and see what works.
That's cool. Yeah, I've always wondered that because I have scars. I was a pretty like tomboy type child, so I was always outside, and I have scars and cuts everywhere. And I always wondered if that would affect a reading or the ability. So if something was cut in one of my main parts of my palm, would that be hard for you to read?
It can be. And it's so interesting. Last year, I was at an event called the Witch Market in Glasgow, which was pretty awesome. And I saw the most unusual pair of hands that I ever saw. A woman approached me and she said, I don't know if you'll be able to read my palm. And I was like, we'll have to have a look at first. And she had a medical condition that only 5 families in the world carry, which is pretty remarkable. I can't remember the name of it, but fingers were all kind of swollen with fluid, and the palm itself sheds a lot of skin each day, to the point where she didn't actually have any lines. It was almost just like a completely smooth surface in the palm. So I kind of looked at it and said, this is a pretty extreme condition. There's no lines. The fingers are all swollen. The fingernails weren't really legible either. So that was probably the only time that I looked at someone's hand and said, I can't read this. I have, and that's again a very rare condition. I have seen many people with scars in the hand, and I've kind of like worked around it. But again, there's also been times where the scar has even been helpful because it's found at like a particular age in the hand. And they've said, oh yeah, that's when, whatever had happened. So it it can go either way, I would say. But I think most people have a hand that is pretty easy to read, even if it is kind of scarred up or bruised up a little bit.
That's very interesting. So when you do these, do you like how long, because I know I'm going to get questions like right away, like how long does it take to, like if somebody were to get a reading from you or purchase a reading, how long is the turnaround? Do they have to wait until they get their reading then? Because I know that's going to be a question.
It's different online than it is in person. In terms of length, this is like my full-time job, so I am pretty available for it. It's much quicker for me to give a palm reading in person. I can do it in 15 minutes if I'm talking to someone. It takes longer to type it up. But it's still, I can usually manage it in about half an hour kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
In terms of typing it up. And I do have a couple of businesses, so I'm not available every day. I've got Fortune by Kalem, which is mainly palm reading. But I have the Poison Palm where you found me, which is more of my jewelry and products in relation to poisons. And
which I love. I love, by the way.
It's pretty cool.
I'm going to have to, I've been looking at your site for Christmas presents for people.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm bringing out like a bunch of new stuff for Christmas. I've just been a little lazy around it because I've started at the new holistic or psychic shop in Edinburgh. I've been there most days of the week. But it usually doesn't take too long. I mean, I think it took me a pretty long time in the beginning when I first went online, when I wasn't sure how I wanted to structure messages or an email. But I've got it kind of down to a science now. It works really well. And it's, again, different for everybody. Some people have a lot of lines in the hand. I mean, I've got pretty much every line in the hand that you could possibly have. And I think I was meant to, just so I could learn about it more from a personal perspective. For some people, the reading is going to be based more on the fingers and the hand shape or the fingernails. For some people, it'll be kind of meaty with the lines, and there'll be a lot there. But it does vary from person to person. For one person, it's going to be more astrological, and I find that, you know, if it goes that way, it's usually someone who knows about their chart. The universe kind of knows what they want to see in their hand. For other people, it will be more describing literal experience in terms of the lines. I like to get a good mix, and I like to mix the traditional palmistry, or what that I find works from it, with the more modern hand analysis.
It's fascinating. I'm learning so much today. I had no idea that palmistry had anything to do with your fingers or your fingernail. Like I had no idea. I thought it was just this area of your palm and that was it. So
every part of the hand, and I do mean like every part, even the skin texture on the back of the hands can tell you something. This sounds really silly to say, but if the skin on the back of the hands is very soft, it tends to be people who are soft in their soul, or they have a lot of refinement in their character. Coarse skin people tend to be a bit more rough and ready or abrasive in their nature. But literally everything in the hand can tell you something. If a finger is bent naturally, and a lot of people do have it, it's illuminating a certain part of the mind that is active. If there's white spots on a fingernail, it's telling you that that person is concerned about a certain area of their life, whether it be career or their confidence or their reputation, whatever it might be. Another thing is rings. I mean, I like to wear rings, and I think they work on an energetic level, but also as an acupressure thing. Because these nerves are connected to your brain in the hands, I think when you add weight to a certain finger, on a symbolic sense, but also on a physical level, it is triggering different parts of your personality.
So when you get, so say somebody purchases a reading, do they like normally, because this is a Sunday and I'm not like all dressed up, but normally on my days, because I do readings every day and I'm on the video usually, I wear a lot of rings. So if I were to get a reading, do you want somebody or prefer them to take a picture of their normal ring placings with their okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I like to see what kind of rings people are wearing, because it's very interesting when people get it right. Each finger kind of has a different characteristic. So like the middle finger, Saturn, is the offensive finger, and Saturn in astrology is known as the oppressor. So I like to wear these kind of big gothic, dark looking rings, whereas its neighbor, Apollo, the marriage or ring finger, it's represented by the sun. We would usually wear like a gold band there to symbolize the sun. So it's very interesting. I noticed that a lot of witches kind of get it right because they're kind of intuiting where it should go.
Normally on this finger, I wear a giant, gaudy, smoky quartz. It's like very
That's perfect.
like
Yeah.
huge, gaudy, and it's really dark. It's my favorite stone. And then here I wear a hessonite garnet, and it's giant. But on
Nice. Yeah.
my husband
Each
knows the jewelry, so
each finger resonates something differently. And again, I do think it works as adding weight as an acupressure thing. But you know, if we're seeing the hands as energy conductors, which just pretty much everybody in the field does,
yes,
then we could say it works on that level too. If you're into crystals or different kinds of metals as well.
that is all fascinating. Someday, are you going to teach courses?
Yeah, I'm kind of working on it right now, but I'm kind of deciding how I want to do it. I don't know if I want to pre-record things or if I want to do like a live Zoom meeting. The only difficulty is visuals, especially when it comes to the lines, because you kind of need pictures of exactly what something looks like to describe it to someone or to show it to someone so they know. There's classes that I can do on the basics, like hand flexibility. That's a really easy one to remember. The more flexible the hand, the more flexible the mind. People who have kind of stiff hands tend to be more resistant to change, and people with extremely flexible hands, they tend to be a bit loopy. Especially true of the thumb. You know, if it lacks flexibility, we call it a stubborn thumb. If it's overly flexible, the person's a bit too generous and giving of themselves.
I cannot wait to tell my husband that, because he can't, like, his thumb just doesn't move.
Yeah, there's a good side and a downside to it. I mean, thumb flexibility, there's some traditions of hand reading that only go on the thumb because it can tell you quite a lot. A stubborn thumb is usually accompanied by strong opinions, a stubborn character.
Yes.
But it's also someone whose will isn't easily bent or broken. They tend to be quite reliable and stick up for what they believe in. Whereas someone with a very flexible thumb, they might be very liberal, very open-minded and generous, but they're probably also lacking in that's what we call hyper-flexibility with you. That's very flexible. You know, they might be giving a bit too much of themselves to the world. They might lack boundaries in that sense because the thumb represents the willpower. So it'd be easy for me to teach something like hand flexibility, or to say, you know, white spots on this finger means this fingernail. But in terms of the lines, you kind of need pictures for that. So I'm thinking of different ways to do it right now, and it's in the works. I think probably in the new year I'll have something sorted out.
That's exciting, because I would be so very, very interested in taking classes. Right now, it seems like that's all I want to do is like hide in my little witch cave here and take classes. So
yeah, I think I was super gutted when COVID happened because I was just getting ready to open my stall, which is kind of open spring, summer, autumn time in the meadows in Edinburgh, and it's really beautiful and there's a lot of people. And then I was kind of forced to not have anything and stay at home, but it's given me the opportunity to study like in different areas and realize that I probably want to write about this a little bit because there's books that I wish I could read, but they haven't been written, especially in regards to the connections of astrology and palmistry. I think a lot of palm readers disagree with that. But you know, from my perspective and what I've seen, I think if I was to write a book comparing someone's natal chart to their hand, I'll always be able to find some kind of link.
That would be fascinating. I was going to ask about the book too, so I was like, you would be a fantastic teacher. You're so very organized, and it's the way you explain it is exciting and clear. Like it's very clear when I explain something, because my mind is everywhere and does not come out right. So I have a tough time. So you would be a fantastic teacher.
I mean, I think it's going to happen more and more as I get older. I'm looking at my hand right now just because it's kind of told me to do it. I mean, I have a writer's triangle in the headline. There's a couple. I've got a teaching square on my Jupiter mount. Like it's things that are already there. But I really like to have things perfected and know that everything is kind of solid before bringing it to other people. The thing that people tend to think about palm reading is that it's quite quick and it's not very detailed, but it's really the opposite. There's so much to teach of it. I have no idea how I would be able to, how many classes this would take.
Right. I'm open to whatever you take. I will be on like a waiting list if you have that. Do you have a newsletter that you put out at all?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of going to start on Patreon and just write different kind of articles about it. So like one article on hand shapes and the elements that might correspond to, one on hand flexibility, the next on nails, the next on, a few different interpretations of the heart line.
Mm-hmm.
Literally there is so much of it. It'll take a little while.
Mm-hmm. That's so exciting. I love when somebody gets to dive into their passion and then make it their life, like make it your life. That's very sad to me. It's very satisfying. So
I'm again trying to save it as well. I want other people to be able to. I would love to have more friends as palm readers to talk about this with, because again, here in Scotland, there's literally maybe half a dozen of us
really,
who do it in a professional sense, and I'm friendly with a couple of them,
Mhm.
but again, they do a different kind of palmistry to me. So in a sense, I'm trying to give it back to the world. I'm trying to let people know that it is just as valid as tarot or any other form of divination that's kind of found its popularity. It's maybe not as easy and it takes a little bit more commitment.
Mhm.
But I think with the growing interest in astrology as well, it should be linked. And I think some people will, when they hear this, will try to disprove me on that. They'll say, oh, well, look at my hand and you can't find anything with my chart. But if you've got a pretty complex chart, for me, for example, I'm a Pisces stellium with a couple of planets in Scorpio. I've got 60% of my chart in water, and I do have the traditional water shape in the hand. It's not always going to be that simple because not everybody is a pure archetype. Not everybody has a stellium or a super dominant element. Sometimes it's going to be more like a subtle aspect that's showing up in your hand.
Mhm.
And again, astrology isn't going to be for everybody in the hand. It's different for different people.
Right.
But it is a little bit more complex than just giving a blanket statement about it.
To me, that makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
It makes it more intriguing to me to go have one done and to learn about it because I know it's more than just one thing.
Yeah.
I like complicated, so that seems interesting.
And I don't try to take away from different traditions as well. I always make a mention of the Romani travelers here in Britain, or the Romani people they call gypsies.
Yeah.
They have such a rich history with palmistry, but I
Mhm.
have found that they tend to do a completely different kind from anyone else. And it's really more like an intuitive reading with the hand. They're kind of just going to look at your hand and say some stuff. That can be great. It can work really well. Other times it doesn't.
Right.
The same with Indian palmistry. Now, I'm not a fan of Indian palmistry. I'm not a fan of Vedic astrology, but I still kind of respect where it comes from and agree that it will work under the right circumstances. Just in the same that I'm not going to be the right palmist for everybody. I'm not trying to fit it to everyone. It's cool that we all have different modalities of it.
Yes, I think that's the best. We humans, we evolve and we are supposed to make things different as we evolve.
Yes.
That's I like that we add bits and pieces of ourselves into our practices and into how we do things like divination because times change. Like we're evolving, even practices should evolve, I feel. And
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
everybody will agree with that because I know that a lot of people are very traditionalists, but
Yeah.
I cherry pick too with my own practice. I pick what I like and I use it, and it's because it works for me now. Now, this my witchcraft practice would not work for somebody, 80, 90, 50 years ago. It's not going to work because times were different.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And while it's fun to think about what a palm reading might have been like 4,000 years ago, people were not the same. Like it was not the same culture, it was not the same world. And so it's going to apply differently. And while you can find a structure to something that maybe goes well for most people, you have to learn how to interpret that differently for different cultures and different periods of time, not just in the century sense, but also at different periods in people's lives. It's gonna change its meaning if you like.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it's all so fascinating. So how do people find you? How would you rather them contact you if they wanted to get a reading from you?
Instagram is great. I love Instagram. It's
Okay.
pretty simple. It's Fortune by Kalem,
Mm-hmm.
Kalem. I'm also on Facebook by the same name. I've never really seen the importance of a website because most of my business is done through Facebook and Instagram. So it's usually just found there. Or my other business, the Poison Palm, same websites. Again, that's more for products, but I'm kind of interchangeable. You know, I'm available for readings wherever.
Okay, cool. Well, I will make sure that I post all of your contact information in the show notes, and I also share this with like the coven that we have, which is basically my Patreon people.
Oh yeah.
And then I will share it in all of our public groups so everybody can have, you know, how to contact you, because I know that I'm not going to be the only one that's going to be scheduling a reading. I find this fascinating. If you had to tell anybody, give anybody some advice, because I know also there's more people that are going to want to look into this or go buy a book and try to learn this, what would you tell them, the first time palm curious people?
Well, it's difficult to do right now in a COVID world. Of course, you'll probably just be working off of pictures or from a distance. If someone is a real book learner, and I love book learning, I would recommend The Art and Science of Hand Reading by Alan Goldberg and Dorian Burgess or Burgess. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Dorian. But it is the leading book in the palmistry field. It is huge. I mean, I've actually got it right here. I'll kind of show you. It's big. It's really, really big. And it's about 600 pages, very large pages, but everything in it is kind of very accurate from, I would say, a scientific perspective, if you like that. Yes. Again, a study of astrology I've found to be massively helpful. Even if you don't want to learn how to read natal charts and relate that in the hand, just knowing the different energies and elements of the planet and how to identify that in the hand will be super helpful. Those are the two things that I wish I had when I started, before I bought like every book I could on Indian palmistry before realizing that I wasn't really into it. Again, don't stop yourself from getting into it. I mean, I think it's really great to see different traditions, and especially the new ones, like chiropractic hand analysis, which really more focuses on fingerprints and stuff like that. It's great to just cherry pick. I don't think that you need to have hard and fast rules about anything, although there are some hard and fast lessons that will benefit you. Try to just work out your own style.
Sure. Okay, cool. Well, I loved this so much. Thank you for sharing this with everybody. I hope that a bunch of people listen to this and they want to get readings and then they get excited about it and try to learn, because like I said, I don't know anybody myself that gives readings like this with palmistry. I know people that have dabbled and, you know, but not like you're an expert in your field. You've done research and you found what resonates with you and what doesn't. So I respect that a lot. Trying to think if I had any questions that I did not ask. I think like you're very thorough.
I mean, we could actually talk for just days, weeks, months on end about palmistry, about every single little bit of it. Yeah. But, you know, the big kind of important things I would say is here's what it is, what it has been, what it could be now, and just kind of work out what's right for you. I do think it's important that every palm reader brings their own kind of style to the table. But I definitely don't want it to fall out of favor just because it seems hard. Tarot seems hard to a lot of people. Yeah. I always describe it as it's kind of like learning the Tarot de Marseille. Just because it's, you know, most people would go for Rider Waite just because it's easier, you can see the picture. Yeah. Palm reading is a little bit more subtle in that sense, but if you get really passionate about it and you really, really look into it, it is just a lot of memorization combined with intuition, combined with life experience and your own lessons. A great place to start is by looking at your own hands. Just look at your hands and think about, you know, what you can learn from them. If you're not confident with the lines yet, get to know people's flexibility of hands and which finger is most flexible and what part of life that correlates to. The fingernails, the condition, the color in someone's hand. There's so many different things that you can work off, not just the lines, although the lines are pretty famous for their talents.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know it's late where you're at, so.
Oh, it's okay. It's just after 7 here right now. So yeah, it's been fun. I love talking about palmistry. And maybe we'll talk again later about.
Oh, absolutely. We're gonna totally have to do this again.
Right.
I want to say thank you to Kalem for doing this. I really did have an amazing time. I learned so much in just, a little over an hour. And I just thank you. Thank you so much. I cannot wait. I'm going to buy those books. I will be listing those in the show notes as well so that people can get those books if they wanted to. I'll also be listing those things in the Witchy Woman Friends group on Facebook. And we will be talking about it in the Coven. And then we do have something special planned for the Coven. So there will be a part 2 to this interview. I sent him all of the pictures required for a palmistry reading of my hands. And we are going to do a live video in the Coven, and that would be our Patreon group on Facebook, the WW Coven. We'll be doing the reveal and have him tell me all about what my palms and my hands tell him about who I am and who I could be and all that good stuff. I am super excited. That will be recorded, so it will be the next episode in this podcast. So next Tuesday it will come out, hopefully, barring any kind of technical difficulties. I will have the audio, and that will be the next episode here, but the Patreon group will be able to see the video. I thought that would be fun for them so they could get to know Kalem a little bit more and just see how interesting this is. I really, really love looking at the different parts of the hand and learning about it. So anyway, that's all I have for today. If you would like to become a member of our Coven, go to witchywomanpodcast.com, click on Join the Coven. You can pick a tier, $1, $5, or $10. It all gets you different benefits. Every one of those tiers gets you into the Coven, and we do so many fun things. We are doing classes and live videos. We started a new witch crafting series that we've been doing on Fridays. I am loving all the new stuff we have going on in the group, and we have got such great support there. We also have good support in the Witchy Woman Friends group that is also on Facebook. Go over there, join that, and then give our Facebook page a like, please. Don't forget to like, subscribe, review, all that good stuff. The podcast, that's how we get the podcast seen. It's how advertisers find me sometimes. So I would really appreciate it. I hate even asking for it, but if you could please give me a good review or at least subscribe, that would be great. Anywho, that's all I got. So until next time, stay witchy. Bye-bye.